Trump ain't for us, and or Biden ain't for us, or this person ain't for us. It's like, okay, well, what are you going to do? How are you going to navigate the next 4 years, no matter who's in this office, to get what you need for yourself and for your people? And it goes back to a two-party system. It's putting ourselves in corners of the room and then saying, okay, after the election, we're all going to come to the center. But the way things are, that has severely limited our ability to be at the table to get what we need done.
Peace, and welcome to another episode of Cook on Monday Morning. At Cook on Monday Morning, we are building lives that make us excited about Monday morning. We believe that if you can own Monday morning, you can own the week. If you can own the week, you can own the year. And if you change your year, you can change your life. Today, I have the good brother, the good blessed brother, Carl Sherman Jr. I'm sure he's gotten the joke Carl Jr. most of his life.
But even more so, man, my middle name is Oscar. So I got it all. Oscar Mayer Wiener, like all of it, man. I'm childhood.
Mr. Sherman is a former member of the Desoto School Board, native of Texas, family man, businessman, community man, and I'm looking forward to learning more about him. We got the opportunity to meet through another trusted friend, Mr. Makai Ali, and I really love the background of DeSoto. I'm eager to hear more about his service experience and what he sees for the future of his community. Mr. Sherman, thank you, brother. I appreciate you.
Man, it is an honor to be here with you. It's definitely my privilege, man. I look forward to the conversation.
I was looking at your Instagram. Your kids are grown, bro. How old are your kids?
Man, they are 12 and 10. Okay. And they are, Trey, my son, he's the third, and he's 12. And so my daughter, Danielle, she's 10. My son, man, he's 5'5", 105 now, right? He just got his physical done. I'm like, dude, you are so much taller at this age than I was. Like, it's definitely exciting to see him grow, man, see both of them grow. But yeah, started out early. God just kind of put that on me, man. And I thank God for it. Had them at 20. I had Trey at 20. Mm-hmm. And so I hadn't even figured out life, right? But here I am having this blessing, man. It's been great to get to know him, to grow, and just both of their spirits. It's crazy how they help complete me, man.
Because I was like, yeah, you young, man. You young to have because you look really young also. But yeah, I guess I got the ages all together now. Did you grow up in DeSoto? Where'd you grow up?
Yeah, I grew up in DeSoto. DeSoto's home, man. My parents moved there in like 94. And so for most of my life, that's been where I've been.
Where were you before?
Yeah, so we originally grew up but we originally were in Hutchins. That's where we were born. Like if I were to say, where did they take us home from the hospital, right? But that was a very quick time relative to the rest of my life. And then spent a couple of years out in Arizona for undergrad before transferring back. And so yeah, most of my life has been in that 75115 zip code.
So for people that don't know, like paint a picture of the DeSoto community. Like what is DeSoto?
Yeah, DeSoto is a lot of things to a lot of people, and depending on who you speak to, you're going to get a different response. What we're known for, and one of the things you brought out like immediately when I told you where I was from was we're known as an affluent Black community, middle to upper income families and Black families in particular that migrated to DeSoto, the first suburb south of Dallas. So if you kind of paint that picture, you literally drive outside the Dallas city limits, 15 minutes from downtown Dallas proper, and you've got this 21 square mile area that is primarily residential, and where we live. We're the last census, a little over 70% African American as far as our demographic makeup, above the state average in median household income. So,
and as we dug deep on that, you sort of talked about some of the dynamics beyond the Black middle class that I thought was interesting. Can you talk more about that?
Just like anything else, man, you have your averages, right? And averages are just that. It's a collection of everyone's inputs. And in DeSoto particularly, there's been a demographic shift, right? Just from a ethnicity standpoint, but also from an economic viability as far as what those households make and the income they generate. So you have a post-Katrina era and then recession era, right? So post-Katrina, you had people moving up from the Louisiana area, New Orleans in particular. After that, you had the housing crisis, right? It was at 2008, 2009, in which you saw DeSoto leading the area in foreclosures and people losing their homes. And so when you have a community that's 70% of their revenue, their city's revenue is based on residential properties, and you have so many vacant homes and people displaced, you have that gap that was kind of formed there. And filling in after that was new entrants to the city. And people look at DeSoto as, hey, this is a place I want to move. This is a place I want to raise a family, especially if you have young African American men and women who you're trying to groom for success. Right? It's a suburban community, great educational system, that dynamic there. But with it, you bring in different cultures, you bring in different realities to come to a city, and so now you really have a tale of two cities. Those that have been in DeSoto, I call them the second wave, right? My parents will be considered a part of that wave that moved in the 90s, some in the late 80s, early 90s. And then you have the post-recession where those families moved in, and they are not the same. And that's not a slight against anyone. It's just the realities, the cultural makeup that we have that we all bring to any conversation is different. And so there's a unique opportunity within our city to figure out how to communicate the level of expectation that we have for our community to grow with, who we're going to be, what we're going to provide as far as services for our community. Once again, you're heavy residential. And now there's a push for, hey, what do we have for our kids? What do we have for the next generation? What do we have as far as restaurants, as far as entertainment and all those things? And what type of offerings do we want our students to be able to have access to once they graduate high school? And so there's a lot of conversations in a city that's just over 70 years old as far as incorporation that we have to have.
Yeah, and I want to get into your experience at the school board. You served 2 terms there. And I got the sense meeting you that your work in politics wasn't over, or I don't want it to be over for you. I don't know what you ultimately end up doing, but I definitely hear the care that you have for the city and the ideas that you have around improving it. Before we get into the school board stuff, though, I do want to ask you about sort of like some of your early influences around leadership, like coming up, who are some of the people that you looked up to? I know you have like a background in sports too, so we can get into that, but how would you respond to that initial leadership influence question?
Yeah. First and foremost, my parents, and for 2 different reasons that I guess my mom may not be as obvious, but I do want to speak to that, and then I'll get to a more larger context and try and be brief. But my parents, my dad grew up, he's the youngest of 5, grew up in poverty, man. Talking about holes in shoes. Mom was a cafeteria worker. His dad left them when he was 5 years old, just really in dire straits for most of his life, right? And so he had me. I'm the oldest of 5 and my siblings, and he actually stayed in the picture, right? He was literally the polar opposite of all of his life experiences of what a father should be, the type of engagement they should have. And so you have this person who grew up in poverty in the South, right here in Texas. And at 7 years old, literally pulled me out of school. We got on a plane, flew to Houston for his first investors meeting. for the company that he started, that he would eventually take public, right? And so I saw his leadership traits on display. Our conversations at the kitchen table were different, I'm sure, than many families, because we talk business at a very early age, and some of the dynamics that it took to lead not only an organization, but he was a leader in the church as a deacon, and then an elder, and eventually a pastor. My mom, the same type of leadership traits from a different standpoint. My mom's from Chicago, man. She's from the North. And you're well traveled here in the States. People from different areas behave and move very differently. And so I got that ambition, that drive, the intestinal fortitude that it takes to start something, stick with it, finish it, and not care what anybody around you says, right? From her, her ability to lead and raise a family as my dad was out doing all the things, traveling and all of those things. She kept everything together at home. She was the glue that bound us all. And she was that person that pushed us to challenge ourselves to do new things, right? So my first public speech was at like 4 years old, and that was because she made me. She pushed me up there, right? And she would very quickly tell us, I'm not raising you to just get in line and follow because that's what everyone else does. I'm raising you guys to be leaders. And so she did a great job kind of imparting that to us. Outside of those two major influences, right? A lot of them, man, when you talk about our community, specifically as a Black male in America, a lot of those influences came at a later age. And that came really, more so college and later in life as I figured out who I wanted to be as a person. And so I would say Stokely, man, was a major influence in my life, because at a time where you had all of the different approaches, right? So you had Martin's approach, you had Malcolm's approach, and then you had Stokely. And Stokely, just one of the things that he said that just stuck out in my mind, man, is, you have a fallacious assumption to think that America cares about people, right? And I was like, yo, this person said this, like that they have a conscience. Like, America doesn't have a conscience. Institutions don't have a conscience. And so you kind of step back and look at life differently. It's a different approach to addressing any type of issue that you have, which is calling it for what it is, and then taking the steps necessary to deliver the change you want to see. And so he would be one that sticks out in my mind, man, as one that's an undercurrent that I really don't have an opportunity to talk about a lot publicly. But yeah, I would say Stokely, man.
Yeah. You gonna take us in another direction?
Oh man,
because I haven't had a chance either. But like at my school board meetings, I would say Stokely is the person I quoted the most.
Yeah.
Kwame Ture. I didn't really discover him, I would say, until college or post college. But I really found him on YouTube. Because you heard of Stokely, you heard of Black Power, and you heard of some of the other figures of the time, but to hear about the Black Panther Party for political action in Mississippi, and to see him conduct these interviews, how articulate and forceful he was, it was like, it was impressive. And then I'm gonna say this is not, Carl talking, this is me. When
go for it.
When Bill Clinton was talking reckless about him at the John Lewis funeral, I was hot. I was like, hold on, bro. I was like, hold on. You was locking us up and Stokely was getting us free. Beloved, what you talking about?
Yeah. And it's not the first time that Bill has said something, former President Bill Clinton. I'll put some respect on it, right? On the office holder. But it's not the first time he said something reckless, man. But I think it speaks to our culture, right? And our responsiveness to advocates. I'm not even gonna put air quotes up there, right? But people who don't have the cultural reality of us, the oppressed, just historically marginalized people, but are thrust into the forefront to push for our issues, our cares, and our concerns, right? There's just a different level of response and care that you have to look at people and say, you know what, this person's operating out of their reality, out of their context. And you know what? They may know a little bit more than I do on this subject because This is their lived experience. And of all places to talk about it at a funeral of another like civil rights leader and icon, it's like, come on, man.
I appreciate that you brought up Stokely, and that's like a driving force for you. I think hearing him for me was about like, and Malcolm really was like the courage to call out like in your face and it be supported, you know what I'm saying? And there's like this, like, go ahead.
I know, I was just gonna say, or not supported, like supported or not, like, you know, and I know, yeah, I'm sure based on where our conversation is going now, I'm more than happy to talk about that as it relates to local politics and my time on the school board. But I'm sorry to interrupt you, man. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, yeah, I meant supported in the sense that like what he's saying, he's backing up. Like it's like
Gotcha.
there's like reason behind, you know, what's being said. And but yeah, let's well, okay. So local politics. Go ahead. Now do it. Good.
No. I'm gonna say go for it. Share with you.
No, well, I wanted to get into that because I brought up Stokely when it came to my service on the school board, and especially around the conversation of what integration means. And you know, the thing that I often quoted from Stokely was a statement where he said, integration is a subterfuge for white supremacy. Like the discussion on integration is always about, you know, black kids getting into white schools, not about white kids going to black schools.
Yeah.
So this inherent sense of inferiority when you're talking about like the quality of schools. And so let's focus on making our schools great. And it's like the same dynamic we have today. We just went through this whole, on our board, a restructuring of how we do student assignment. It's like the same conversation, you know, it's the same conversation where we are basing quality of education on whiteness. And it's scores, but it's also whiteness, you know? so like, it's always about like, oh, you know, how do we get these kids in there?
Right.
And because the reverse conversation is never like people will just opt out. That's where Stokely sort of interceded in like my advocacy around this particular issue. How did it work for you?
And I think you're asking specific to like, well, in this context, specific to how it showed up for me at the school board dais, right? Mm-hmm. Like, how did it lead my interactions and things like that, man? Which is essentially what helped usher me out of the school board, right? Mm-hmm. Is one, I approached it from the standpoint of, first of all, I was asked to run. It was not on my radar at all. I pride myself on being helpful to others, and I think that God's given me the ability to navigate through different industries, organizations, and have an impact, right? Because one thing I do really well, I feel, is I'm very self-aware, and I'm big on outsourcing non-core competencies. And a part of that is becoming a student of whatever it is I do. And so I approach this from, hey, I didn't want to run for the school board. You guys asked me to. You couldn't find anybody else. And months literally went on. It was like, okay, I'll do it. I told them, man, straight up, I said, y'all got 1 year out of me. I'll run for 1 year. Y'all gonna have to call a special election, do whatever, because it's not in my plans. Got on it a year, man. Went to my first Black school board conference, NAPSI, right? And it was like, I'm listening to them, and I'm like, yo, y'all are right. Like, as it relates to education, right? Specifically, how do we create spaces for Black students to have opportunities for Black excellence? And what does that really look like for them to be economically viable in their community, economically viable in life, right? And that goes beyond scope and sequence. That goes beyond what we call in Texas TEKS that you have to learn. That speaks to how do we address the cultural reality that is in Black students' everyday life right now. And that is, they have to be 2 times as good, if not better. They have to go to the right school to be able to make it in certain circles, right? And so how do we tear down those walls, those barriers to entry in our community? And oh, by the way, I serve in a community that, you know, is economically doing better than any other community of Black folks, right, across the state of Texas, and is highly educated. So how do I communicate to them that the way we've been doing things could be enhanced, right? And so in that conversation, that led me to talk about things like, how do we have a culturally responsive curriculum? You know, how do our books show our culture? How do students see themselves in everyday interactions that they have on their campus? And that was a difficult conversation to have because, in many cases, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And so some folks will say, hey, you're getting the results that you want, you're seeing the growth. We don't have any issues, but really we do have issues. And so for me, it was leading those conversations, making people uncomfortable along the way, because at the end of the day, we started out talking about my kids, man. My kids get this stuff at home, but they really should be getting this stuff at school as well. And what will happen is you have students who graduate who don't know who they are. They literally have no concept of who I am as a person, how it informs the decisions that I make in life, and how to effectively navigate life, because my reality is not the same as my white counterpart. My reality is not the same as my Latino counterpart. My reality is mine. And I have to be able to once again navigate those norms that I have as a person to effectively communicate and present myself in a way that, once again, the most important thing, I can be economically viable for my family and those that are going to come after me.
Yeah. Economic viability. I mean, it's one of the reasons why I'm actually leaving the school board and trying to do other types of work that speak to that. And so I want to dive deeper on that and talk a little bit about the DeSoto district. I think, do you all have about 10,000 students? How many students are in the DeSoto district?
Yeah, man. With COVID, you don't know how many students you have, but no, at the height of it, we were close to 10,000 students. I want to say the district right now is about 8,900, perhaps 9,000. But yeah.
When did you first run? What year was it?
2013, 13, yeah.
2013, okay. And DeSoto has 3-year terms.
Correct.
Are there term limits?
No term limits. No term limits. And it's at large. I think you guys run by place out there, but
we're at
you
large
can have
in San Francisco. In Oakland,
okay,
they have districts across the bay.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So we're at large.
And how many members on the DeSoto school board?
7-member board.
Okay. Yeah, we're also 7. So we're 7 at large, and we stagger 3 and 4. Are you all 7 at once, or is it also staggered?
No, it's also staggered. Yeah.
Okay.
3, 2, and 2.
All right. So 2013, you run. You're probably in your mid-20s, late 20s, right? When you run?
25.
Mid-20s.
Yeah.
Okay. And
smack on the dot.
First time you went on the first race?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, went on the first race, man. Ran against an incumbent. There were 4 of us in that race, and I was able to win.
Yeah, I lost my first race.
What did it teach you?
I don't want to lose again. I think it helped set me up for the second run, and all the lessons of that, I would break down, but I want to keep the conversation focused on you.
Got you.
So 25, I guess you have both your kids by now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're in your first term on the DeSoto school board. What is like? Well, walk me through that first race. Like you said, people convinced you to run. What was that first race like for you?
I don't think anybody's asked me that before. What was that first race like for me? So I'm in a political family, right? My dad, was on the city council and eventually ran for mayor, won his mayoral race. So from that standpoint, it was life as usual in that sense. For me, I had a lot going on, man. I just, had a career change, doing really, really well, kind of in that new role. And so the campaign, if I can be really, really honest, I leveraged my support system a heck of a lot, man, to do the everyday campaign work that most people can't say that they did. And now that you ask me that and I'm being reflective of it, I feel like I approached it from the standpoint of let the chips fall where they may. I'm going to go out there. But at that time in my life, I was more safe than I was really being true to what I felt we needed to do as a district.
And the political family part, I actually didn't know that your dad was mayor. He's mayor of DeSoto.
Yeah, he was. He was. Yeah, the city has term limits. They do. He served 2 years as our mayor. He was the first African American mayor elected to serve in that role.
So it's a majority Black city, and he was the first Black mayor.
He was. Yeah, and at the time it was pretty split. Okay. I want to say there was more African Americans, but it wasn't a census year. But it was definitely a changing dynamic. I mean, and we look at our yearbook now throughout the years and watch the demographic shift and change literally by the body, the students. And so, but yeah, he was the first.
How old were you when he became mayor?
22. Okay. 23. Okay. So somewhere in there. Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah, no doubt. No doubt I was an adult. We started his last term as mayor. There was a year where he was mayor and I was school board president at the same time. So that was pretty neat.
Now, you talked about the influence of your parents in Stokely, but now hearing a little bit more about some of your dad's work, it sounds like he's pretty accomplished.
Yeah. No, I like to think he is. He's currently our state rep right now as well. So he's still in public office and fighting on behalf of the folks here in the local community. But yeah, no doubt. When you put it in context for his experiences just growing up, there's no way that someone would say, hey, this is going to be the person that's going to rise and ascend to this level.
And you say you're the oldest of 5?
Yep, oldest of 5, man. Okay. There's a full decade between the oldest and youngest. So
yeah, y'all really in the South. It's still got big families out there, man. Ain't nobody having kids over here.
Man. I'm not even gonna respond to that in the way that I would naturally, man. But no, big family.
How young is the youngest sibling?
Yeah, so he's 22.
Are they all in politics? What's going on generally with people?
No, I'm the only one that did politics. So I'm the oldest, 32. Ryan, my sister, we're 19 months apart. She's actually married to Jonathan Traylor, who is who I manage, right? Kind of talk about offline. And so she does her own blog and wife life and all of that good stuff, leads a women's devotional. And then the middle is Ellis. He's a fireman in DeSoto. And so once dad was no longer mayor, he could actually work for the city, right? So he did that. We're 7 years apart. And then there's Erin, and she is living her best life. I love the spirit that she has, man. She just recently graduated college. And so she's literally taking this time to figure out what she wants to do and doing it on her own terms. So I'm like extremely jealous of her, right? We are 9 years apart. And then there's Jordan. We're 10 years apart. He's a police officer in a neighboring city. So everyone has in some way a public service type of impact and mentality.
And when we met, you mentioned briefly that you played college sports.
Yeah. Now I played at University of Arizona, and I used to play loosely, right? So I got an academic scholarship, and then I walked on to the football team and played 1 year. And so yeah. That was a childhood dream of mine. I said I want to play college football at some point, and made it happen, man.
And so you go back, and where'd you finish your undergrad?
I finished at Northwood University. It's a private school, campuses in Michigan, Florida, and then here in Texas.
You saw your dad mayor. You were president of the school board. Do you see yourself running for mayor?
It's the timing of this is perfect, right? They just called for a special election. Our mayor recently passed, and so definitely praying for her family in this season. But there's a special election for that. I'm not running for it right now, no matter how many people call me, and I'm not in that space right now to do it.
What are some of the top priorities you see for the city? It sounds like you know it intimately.
Yeah, we have to shore up ourselves economically. We talked about before, when you ask, hey, what industries do residents find themselves in? And the reality is, for those high paying jobs, for those even living wage jobs. Now, in a sense, most of our residents commute to some other place for work, for their employment. And so that leaves a void within your city. And it's something that people don't necessarily always think about. But if most of my residents are driving out of the city for work, that means they're eating out of the city for lunch. That means they're picking up their coffee closer to their job. That means that the money that they go to work for literally leaves our community 5 days a week. And so that's extremely problematic when you're trying to attract businesses, when you're trying to attract the retail component that you need, because you have no daytime consumer. And so we've got to do a better job, a more intentional job of making sure that we have opportunities for our residents to work, live, and actually play within our community. So that's the first thing. The second thing is we have to shore up our gaps from an educational system at the early stages, early development, right? And why is that important for the city? It's important for the city because there are existing businesses within our community, whether those are early childhood centers, development centers, and wraparound services there. What type of supports are we providing for them as a collective city, right? And that goes beyond how we incentivize them. How do we leverage our nonprofits in our community? How do we leverage our private sector industry and institutions and our public school system in a one high school town to work together in some type of, memorandum of understanding or whatever that looks like, to once again provide wraparound services for our families? So it was very big for us to do full day pre-K when the state wasn't funding, and put all of those students on one campus and start at 18 months and say, we're going to start training these kids now to give them the vocabulary, the words that they need when they start kindergarten and be successful. And a part of that is, guess what? We just talked about in the first thing. These parents are working out of the city. They need after school care. What type of environments are they going into outside of that? And then the natural retail component that we have to look at as well, and really leveraging the land here. And you don't know this right from Adam, but we have a major thoroughfare, I-35, busiest highway in the state, runs right alongside the outskirts of our city. What are we doing with that frontage road? How are we being creative and attracting new industry to fill that space in a way that will benefit our community in the long run? And so part of that, it seems easy, it seems very simplistic, but when you dive into the culture of the city, the founding fathers and those that have run the city for, through the 70s and 80s, there was a desire to be a bedroom community. There was a desire to keep public transit out. There was a desire to do all these things. And that takes a mind shift. You have to change the approach. And so I think that's what's needed right now, especially if we expect our kids who go off to college or go off to start life to come back to the community.
Yeah, it sounds like you just laid out the platform for mayor. It sounds like on Cook on Monday morning, Carl Sherman Jr. just announced his candidacy for Mayor of Desoto, exclusive for the people.
Man, you know what? And it would be ideal. I hope and I would love to see that be a part of someone's platform, because just if I could be real frank, and this is my conversation with folks in our community now, we spend time outside of DeSoto. We spend our money outside of DeSoto every day. And then the natural thing to ask is, well, why the heck do I live here? Mm-hmm. And when I ask my kids, hey, if you could pick any city, and I've done this, if you could pick any city, where you want to live, where would it be? And when they get out of, I want to move to LA, and I like to live in Chicago for a minute, and we say, okay, locally, where? It's not DeSoto. And the reason is they don't spend time in DeSoto. When kids have a birthday party, they're in some surrounding cities. When we go out to lunch, we say, hey, pick where you want to go. More likely we're in Dallas. We're downtown somewhere, and so what ties do people have to community if there's nothing that binds them there outside of a public school, right? At some point that affinity wanes. And so, yeah, I would hope, man, that someone would take this serious, right? And run it as a platform issue, but then more importantly, take steps to actually enact it.
You sound like that was a good deflection too. You're like, I've heard this, bro. That was so smooth. I was like, oh yeah, yeah. You
I
know this
appreciate
guy.
it. Just a little bit.
I like the point though, because I want to get into economic viability too before you finish, because I like what you're saying about spending money in the community. And I think I mean, just going around today, right? Like I bought coffee that was $3.25. I spent $1 tip. I bought a few pieces of some few vegetables for a salad. I bought another salad somewhere else. Like I probably spent like $30 today walking in this vicinity, and none of the businesses here are owned by Black people, right? I mean,
Okay.
San Francisco has been gentrified, but if I were getting my gas and going to Starbucks and doing all that other stuff, building up other businesses, I can see that could be, especially problematic. But one of the waves that's happened, especially in the Democratic Party, is this whole democratic socialism. Like, it kind of comes off like as an anti-business, pro-tax agenda, which which makes it really difficult it hurts the small businesses the most, because the bigger people can afford to absorb the cost, or they figure out they have the resources to maneuver around the cost, And so like the commitment to building a city that works business wise is kind of like lost in the Bay Area. Like, we don't have cities that work. I mean, businesses are here, but the biggest ones are staying. And it seems like in Texas, people still got some sense. I don't know. They could be progressive and still not want to kill business. You know what I'm saying? That's what I'm hearing coming from you.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I wish that it was a widely held belief. I'll say it in that way, because on one end, and this is a problem with a two-party political system, right? Is that a lot of times the common sense things are lost, and it becomes what do the unions back? Okay, that's what the unions back. That's what we're rolling with. Okay, what does a business owner, the small business owner, back? Okay, that's what we're rolling with. What are states' rights in all of this, right? And so I think that a lot of times those issues become the issue of the day, but they ignore the real everyday concerns of people who the institutions are called to serve, right? And that's without us getting into lobbyists and just the ability for people to have access to elected officials. That's not talking about that at all. But that is to say that local government, the beauty of it when we say all politics is local, is that I should be able to reach out to my city council person. I should be able to reach out to my mayor, my school board official, my state representative. Hopefully, congressional districts are a little bit larger, more dense in population, but you should have some level of access to them for the everyday concern to be heard. And, a lot of times when it comes to our response from, once again, elected office, it's driven by businesses and institutions. And so then you have to look at the policy, you have to look at what's in place and figure out who it benefits or whom does it benefit, right? We had a presidential candidate say that corporations are people too. And I'm not saying, I'm not saying that's good, bad, or indifferent. I'm just saying that's a reality that you have to be prepared to navigate. And the people who have the resources to navigate it best, the ones that come out winning and come out ahead. And so how do you create a local ecosystem that benefits the people in that community, right? Where they can, I know in your sense, it's gentrified, but even within that, how can you keep that money in the local economy? And then how can you get people who live in the community to be more representative of the business owners who are there, right? And not just someone that comes in with the resource and says, I'm going to open up shop in this Black community or this Latino community, even though I'm not culturally representative of the people that I'm called to provide a service for. Mm-hmm. And so it's a difficult thing, in my opinion, once again, just because of the construct. A two political party system does not represent what's needed for individuals completely.
Yeah, I'm one of the few people maybe that actually read Ice Cube's, what he's been pushing out around the contract with Black America.
Yeah, yeah.
and you know, written by really respected academics, not really old ideas, like very like familiar ideas, people that actually read it, and it got wrapped up in this like this finessing, like, oh, he's with Trump thing. It really got just like lost, you know.
Yeah.
But what I appreciated about a lot of the tenets of that agenda was um, a focus on economic development for the Black community,
Mm-hmm.
and the need for capital injection, and like a lot of these policies that are well intentioned, that uh, you know, whether it's like minimum wage or health insurance or like whatever the thing is to make sure people who are working can afford to do what they do. Um, you know, running something and being profitable to actually keep it going makes it
Yeah.
difficult, you know, unless you can raise the money from some other place. And you're already familiar with this. You already know some of this stuff. A lot of the people that run businesses in this community, this neighborhood that I'm in, you know, they don't live here. And I'm like, oh, I mean, that's probably smart. You know what I'm saying? like they, you know, and then I was talking to the grocery store person. uh, You know, I'm like, how do you hire someone to work at a grocery store in San Francisco?
Hmm.
Like, where are they commuting from? Because you don't work at a grocery store. This is like a very big assumption, you know.
Yeah.
But basically, the average rent here is $2,800, right, a month. So you're gonna working $15 an hour, $17 an hour, paying $2,800 in rent. That don't make any
Right.
sense. Like, where are they living, and how do you hire
Right.
people to work at it? You know. So I got a lot to say. I don't know.
Yeah.
What's your response to me?
No, no, no. You're spot on, man. And I feel like this is a conversation many people don't have, and I really appreciate it. Appreciate the opportunity. You can pick up on people who are very intellectual and studious and measured. And when I say measured, not from a standpoint of caution, but measured in their response to get the whole complete picture before they actually open their mouth to say something. So, in full disclosure, I haven't read Ice Cube's his full statement on the Plan for Black America. I haven't read it, but I also haven't commented on it. And that's because, once again, I haven't read it. But I know this about people. And what I learned that was increasingly frustrated over my last couple of years in service, and it changed the way I navigated things, is people don't read. Just people flat out do not read. And so they're being dictated to from a media talking head or influencer who may not be well versed in the subject, who is going to pick up whatever clickbait there is to put it out there, and we take it and run with it. Here's the reality. While I'm a registered Democrat and listed as a Democrat, I'm pro my community all day, every day. And the reality is, if Trump came to me and said, Carl, you know, we're going to support your candidacy for mayor of DeSoto or for whatever office, and we're going to let you stand on whatever values and how you feel like you can deliver your community and make it more economically viable for the years to come, I don't care. And I probably shouldn't use Trump, right? But at the end of the day, my community should trump whatever the resource is that's coming in to support it. And if I've got access to a Trump White House or a Biden White House or a Kamala White House, whomever it is, it's important and incumbent on me to leverage my access to be a benefit to my community. But many cases we ignore that, man. I'm not going in. You got me going, man, because it's so disheartening to hear it and see it. And you push back and you say, well, what about this? You know, what about this tenant? Did you think about this? And, oh, I don't know. I just know, you know, Trump ain't for us, and or Biden ain't for us, or this person ain't for us. It's like, okay, well, what are you going to do? How are you going to navigate the next 4 years, no matter who's in this office, the next 3 years, no matter who's in this office, to get what you need for yourself and for your people? And once again, I feel like that's a lost art these days, and it goes back to a two-party system. You know, it's putting ourselves in corners of the room and then saying, okay, after the election, we're all going to come to the center. But the way things are, as polarized as our country is right now on issues that have varying levels of importance in the everyday interactions within our communities, that has severely limited our ability to be at the table to get what we need done.
I completely agree. And when it comes to partnering with Trump or Biden, like whoever is going to help the people meet objectives for the people, like if the people are the objective, then it really shouldn't matter. And part of this game that's problematic is, if you're in the seat, people say stuff and maybe they actually believe it, but maybe they don't, and they're just saying it to appease the base. They don't want to like get rejected by their base or whatever. So, they can't publicly, they can't even like seek collaboration. It's like career detriment to seek collaboration with somebody that is from an opposing view. And like I had on editor-in-chief of The Root on the podcast, like back when the pandemic started. The truth is, when Trump got elected, media won. Like they all had record profits, and the clickbait was crazy, right? Like he made a lot of media people really rich.
Yeah.
Of like the fears of like what he was doing, right? And The Root was a part of that. And and so I was trying to like get the lady, she's so sweet. I was trying to get her to admit that Trump, like it's something that Trump did that was like, okay, you know what I'm saying? And not that I was looking for her to, because the reason why I loved what she represented, what the paper represents, was because she said that we don't care, like anybody can get it. Like if over our people, anybody can get it.
Right.
So over our people, if anything happens that's a W, then like we gotta like, hey, thank you, Like, I don't care who he is. If he letting out people out of jail, thank you. Black college's money, you know what I'm saying? So so now that he's gone, right, we record this post-election, it's not really relevant. But what I am concerned will happen is that people will go easy on Biden and Harris. All that energy they gave toward Trump, all the hysteria, they're gonna go easy on them, and they're gonna go back to sleep. So what I'm hoping is that they keep that energy. Like you was all upset, keep that energy.
Right. And then you have to point out, what were you upset about? Like we're good, and I say we as people in a busy world with a million distractions, right? And news every day of the week. We are good for hollering when it hurts, but not sticking around to see if we fix the thing that actually hurt us in the first place, right? We get excited. We going to the polls because this, that, and then we good. We got there. What policies coming out? What changes are really going to be in place to affect us? It's. I hope for a new day, and I think if I can just be real candid, it's going to be more of a shift in our elected officers and officials that we put in these positions to keep that energy going. Because it's very easy to get in there and become complacent if your heart wasn't there in the first place. Because we know they can go have a stump speech in one part of town, say one thing, and then go to the other and say something completely different and marry it and excuse it away with semantics. But you got to look at the policy that's coming out. What are the tangible results? What are the measurable goals that this person brought to office, and what are we coming out with? Because once again, don't slap a D on it and just think that it's going to be good and it's going to be all right, because, it's just not always the case.
We're approaching the top of the hour, and we have our rapid fire that we're going to walk into. Before we do, I really like Texas, bro. Like I haven't seen all of Texas, but I love Houston. I love Dallas. I haven't been to Austin. I'm hoping to visit DeSoto at some point, but it sounds like I'll go to DeSoto and go back to Dallas. That's what it sounds like you said.
I'm going to take you to the best places to eat in DeSoto, man, and we'll have a good time there. And then I'll drive you back to your hotel in Dallas. So, and we'll spend the rest of your trip outside of the city, right?
Well, under the Mayor Sherman administration, there'll be hotels in Dallas, in DeSoto for me to stay at.
No doubt, man.
So rapid fire, are you ready?
As ready as I'm gonna be.
Do you meditate?
Absolutely, every day. Gotta have it.
What's one book you would recommend?
So that I don't repeat what's already been said. The true stories of an economic hitman.
What personal weakness can you forgive in someone?
Just about everything.
Do you have a motto?
No motto, man. It's taking every day, every season, and taking the motto that applies to that.
Okay, last and final question. The house is on fire, all the family, and the pets are out.
All right.
What's 3 things you grab?
The safe. Honestly, I struggle with everything else, right? It's, it is what it is. And a part of that is our generational thing. Just about everything's digital these days, and I can recreate it. So.
Okay. Yeah. That was rapid fire. This was Carl Sherman Jr., Carl Oscar Sherman Jr.
All the first names, all in combined.
Former president of the Desoto Board of Education, future mayor. I'm just gonna put that on him. Just put it on. Family man, good brother. Thank you for doing this. I appreciate you.
Hey, the honor was mine, man. It's been a privilege. Thanks for having me.
Peace, and thank you for listening to another episode of Cook on Monday Morning. At Cook on Monday Morning, we are building lives that make us excited about Monday morning. We believe that if we can own Monday morning, we can own the week. If we can own the week, we can own the year. And if we change our year, we can change our lives. I'd also like to thank, of course, our listeners. Thank you. Please consider subscribing to Cook on Monday Morning, the YouTube channel, if you haven't already. I'm grateful to you, and I appreciate your continued support. Share the podcast with a friend. Help us grow our community of doers. And if you're listening via audio, also hit subscribe or rate and review it on Apple, if that's how you enjoy the podcast. Now, if you're interested in starting your own podcast, I wrote an article. It's called How to Start a Podcast During a Pandemic. You can find the description in the box below. It goes over the equipment that we use and some book recommendations that could be helpful in considering an approach for you. Cook on Monday Morning is a product of the Luther Harris Holding Company. We work in partnership to create solutions that drive social impact. We do that by building strategic partnerships between businesses and government. We recruit diversity talents at high impact roles, and we help companies drive impact in the communities where they do business. If you'd like to learn more, send me an email. I'm at info@stevoncook.com. I'd like to thank the people that make our podcast possible. Our videographer, David Topete. Thank you, sir. Our copy editor, Fernando Sico Marquez and Devin Sketchinger. Thank you both. Now I get up every morning with the intention to create value and showcase my love to the people that keep our cities moving. They are our teachers, school lunch workers, custodians, social workers, firefighters, police officers, EMT workers, garbage collectors, bus drivers, and nurses. They are our employers, the folks creating jobs and keeping our economy moving. They are our gig workers, stocking our shelves, driving our ride shares, delivering our food. To all of you, this podcast is for you. You live in places like San Francisco, Oakland, Richmond, Antioch, San Mateo, Los Angeles, Dallas, Houston, New Orleans, Baton Rouge, Miami, Orlando, the Carolinas, Virginia Beach, Milwaukee, Kansas City, Cleveland, Detroit, Harlem, Brooklyn, and also shout out to our folks on the continent of Africa, Nigeria, and also, in the islands of Jamaica, Kenya, and Ethiopia. To all of you, this podcast is for you. This message is touching the world and will continue to because of you. Until we meet again. Peace, and we out.